developer conference. I love the kind of marrying of all these different topics and like seeing all these folks in person, both people I've met on the internet and real life. It's a super energizing place to be.
Well, this is actually my first time at Universe. It has been awesome. Not only the event and how it looks and feels, but the people and the energy, like everybody's really excited to do really nerdy things. And that's kind of my favorite thing.
The community is really great. There's all different types of people. Everyone obviously really loves the GitHub platform. And we're all here for essentially just making ourselves better and more productive.
I came here, I got open source, and I got a fresh new deck. I'm loving it. It's great. It's fantastic.
The conversation, the number of different topics that you can talk to people about. We literally just had a question and we're talking to some of the GitHub experts about it and solved a problem we've been working on.
Seeing the vibrancy of the community, the colors, even just how things are portrayed and the little gifts that have a programmable name tag. I love all these quirky little things. It speaks to the community of just how nerdy, but also fun and interactive. And I think it's a really just cool vibe to be around.
I've spoken at many conferences at this point, and most of them are more corporate driven and quite a bit just louder, frankly. But here I've made friends with many people. Everyone feels approachable, and I feel approachable too, and I've really enjoyed that experience so far.
And training. That's why we've launched GitHub. We believe that every developer can be an AI developer with the right tools and training. That's why we've launched GitHub Models on the GitHub Marketplace, a place for you to explore and experiment with a hand-picked collection of top models with entitlements attached to your GitHub account. So let's try out one of the newest models, GPT-4o. We can pass in an initial user prompt to interact with the model, and we can use the playground to adjust the parameters. For example, we can change the system prompt and experiment with the temperature for more or less randomness. Now that we've adjusted the parameters, we can send user prompts to interact with the model, simulating its use for our application. Now GPT-4o looks great, but I want to test how a different and smaller model handles this scenario. So let's switch to Phi3 mini instruct and evaluate its response. Looks good. Now we can also navigate to the details page to find out more information about the model through the README, evaluation, and transparency tabs. Now I've made my decision and I want to start using the models with code. By clicking the code button, we get access to some getting started instructions. We can even use a GitHub codespace to create a pre-configured development environment, ready with SDKs and some samples. Now the model API calls use the entitlements that come with my GitHub account. And because the codespace knows who I am, I don't have to add an API key or sign up to any other services to start experimenting in code. Talking about experimenting, let's update the streaming sample to use Phi3 mini 4K instruct. We'll also update the prompt and continue with our experiments. Now those entitlements we mentioned earlier follow you wherever you're logged in, including the GitHub CLI. Here, we're calling AI models to create questions for first-year computer science students so they can check their knowledge of Git. But we can even combine other CLI commands with the GitHub CLI. For example, let's summarize the last 10 commits of this repository using Phi3 mini instruct. GitHub Models helps minimize the friction as you explore and experiment with AI models. So take your first steps in building AI-powered apps by joining the waitlist for GitHub Models. We can't wait to see what you build next.
Hey everyone, I'm Kadesha, and welcome to Open Source Friday, the show where we talk to maintainers about the apps that they're maintaining. Thank you so much for joining us. I am super excited for today's episode. We'll be talking to the community manager from Dapr, and Dapr is a runtime system that allows backend engineers to use or to build microservices. I'm still curious to learn more about what Dapr does. I got tongue twisted there, Mark. Welcome to the stage. How are you?
Hey, Kadesha. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good, good. So I got a little tongue tied there explaining what Dapr is. Can you summarize what you said to me
Yes.
earlier? Like, what is Dapr?
Yes. So developers can use Dapr to quickly build reliable and secure microservices that can basically run anywhere where you can run on top of Kubernetes. So
There we
that's the
go.
one line.
There we go. Welcome to the show, Mark. So happy to have you. And thanks so much for joining, everyone. Super, super excited to get into what Dapr is. But before I get there, Mark, tell us a bit about yourself. Who is Mark and what do you do?
Yes. So, hi everyone. It's super nice to be here. I'm Mark Duiker. I live in the Netherlands. I'm a developer advocate for a company called Diagrid, and that's founded by the co-creators of Dapr Open Source. That's Mark Vossel and Jeroen Snyder. Been working for them for like 1.5 years now. And next to being a developer advocate for them, I'm also one of the community managers, as already mentioned, for the open source project Dapr. I'm not doing that by myself. There are like 2 other community managers because it's a really big project. So lots and lots of people are involved in this project. It's really exciting.
Wow, wow. So how long has Dapr been around? Tell us more about Dapr. How did it come? What is the genesis story of Dapr?
Yes. So Dapr is almost 5 years old now. So it's been around for a while already. So in October, Dapr will be 5 years old, and we're actually gonna host like a virtual event, like a Dapr Day celebration event to celebrate
Oh,
5
wow.
years of Dapr. So yeah, that's really gonna be a big milestone. So it originally comes from Microsoft Research. Yeah? So Microsoft has its own like research department for all kinds of new exciting ideas, and Dapr came out of that department. And then matured quite quickly. It's been moved into open source quite quickly after it came out of Microsoft Research. And yeah, it did really quickly grow quite some traction. And then over the years, in 2021, it was submitted to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation,
Oh, wow.
CNCF. So it's been part of that now for a while, and it's very likely that we actually move to the final graduated stage this year within CNCF. So again, that's also going to be a big milestone for the Dapr project.
That's a big deal.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And there's also a lot of stuff needs to be done to get to that graduated level. You have to fill in lots of paperwork, and you have to have lots of processes, right? So it's like a solid open source project, and there are like steering committees involved, and lots of end user interviews, so people can really vouch for Dapr. That is really like a good solution to use. So yeah, a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes actually.
Wow. So what are some of the main features of Dapr before we get right into the demo?
Right. So I think it does help if I show you some slides, because it gives a bit more context. So let's add my slide. I won't show a lot of slides, but just a couple of slides. So Dapr really makes sense if you're building distributed applications, right? So you don't have just like one application running, but you have multiple small applications. Some people use like the term microservices. Typically, these are like event-driven things, right? So maybe some kind of customer is using a web front end to place an order that goes to a front end and uses a kind of gateway and then ends up in some kind of back end system. So they're like, for instance, in this example, some shopping cart is involved and some inventory checks is involved, and then you need to go to a checkout and a payment and shipping. Those are quite typical things you would see in some kind of an e-commerce kind of solution. Dapr is not limited to only this kind of e-commerce situations, but this is quite typical for like a microservice environment. But yeah, if developers need to build this kind of thing, they have to think of a lot of features, right? So how do you do like reliable communication between these services? Do you do like request reply? Is everything synchronous, or do you use things like message brokers and event buses to do some pops-up messaging to make it more asynchronous? You have to think about security as well, right? So is the inventory allowed to talk to the storage, and is the shopping cart allowed to talk to the inventory service? All those kind of things. So the developer needs to think about a lot of these cross-cutting concerns and next to their regular domain logic actually. So, and that's really where Dapr comes in. If I move to the next slide. So it's a very busy slide. I'll help take it to you step by step. But the nice thing about Dapr is that you can use it basically with any programming language, because you don't use Dapr as a library inside your code, but Dapr runs in a sidecar. So it runs in a process next to your application. And as long as your application can communicate via HTTP or gRPC, and then you can use Dapr. So there are also lots of client SDKs. So if you don't want to send like plain HTTP or gRPC messages, you can use one of our client SDKs. So we have them for Node and for Python and for .NET and for Go, etc. So that typically makes it a bit easier, especially if you're used to like typed languages. I'm pretty much used to .NET, so I use the Dapr.NET SDK. It makes a lot of sense, but you don't need to use these SDKs if you don't want to. So there's no need for a dependency in Dapr inside your application. And then Dapr exposes lots of different APIs. So those are all the squares you see here. So if you want to use, for instance, like a workflow, Dapr provides a workflow API. So you can actually write your long-running processes in code. Dapr offers like a pub/sub capabilities, service invocation, state management. Well, I'm not gonna list them all, but yeah, Dapr is like a toolbox for microservice developers.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the bottom part is, well, you can also land your application anywhere, because Dapr typically runs on top of Kubernetes. So you can run it on plain Kubernetes, like on-premise, but also, of course, in all of the major cloud providers as well. So it's nice to have this toolbox, but there's actually more. Let me first actually do this one, because when you use Dapr in production, then you typically end up in this situation. So you have like all of your services as before, but then there's this Dapr sidecar running right next to it. And all of the communication that's happening between all of these services and all of the other resources, like message brokers and storage systems, all of the communication is actually done via these sidecars. So there's no direct communication between all of the blue hexagons. All of the communication actually goes through these sidecars. And that offers then built-in resiliency. So in case like a call maybe fails due to like a network error, the Dapr sidecar will retry that failed call. And that's actually, it comes built in with lots of useful default values, but you can even override all these default values for all these resiliency policies.
So really, before you keep going, I have a question, right? So
sure.
You've mentioned sidecar a few times.
Yes.
Can you explain what that sidecar, what you mean by sidecar?
So I think it's quite a familiar term if you're doing like Kubernetes things, because in Kubernetes you have pods, and then you can have like multiple processes in a pod. So, and Dapr, is indeed typically run on top of Kubernetes. So I think people familiar with Kubernetes know about this. But the whole sidecar model is not limited to Kubernetes. So you can also build your own sidecar, for instance. But what is nice about the sidecar is that typically all kinds of functionality is put into this sidecar. So you as an application developer don't have to program these things yourself. And in case of Dapr, Dapr comes built in with all of these APIs for pub/sub, for state stores, for workflow, etc. So you don't have to write that code yourself. And it comes with all these resiliency capabilities and security capabilities. So you don't have to write this in your application code. So typically a sidecar model is used to actually move some responsibility from your application to another process. So in this case, Dapr takes care of the heavy lifting.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but a good question. Yeah, because I think outside the Kubernetes landscape, you probably don't see it as much. But if you're dealing with Kubernetes a lot, then you typically see a lot of these sidecar models, because it's relatively easy to do it with Kubernetes.
Cool.
Yeah. One thing I do want to mention is Dapr offers all of these APIs, right? So like I mentioned, state management and pops up and like secret management. But Dapr itself is not a state store, and Dapr itself is not a message broker, etc. But it can integrate with really hundreds of different types of resources. And I will show it in the demo later. I think I'll use the state management example. But Dapr offers a state management API for like key value pairs. So just if you want to save some data and want to retrieve some data, you can use the state management API of Dapr. But then you can configure it to use either something in Azure, like Cosmos DB, but maybe you're running something locally and you can use like a local Redis container. So that's actually the demo I'm going to show. So it's really like a very flexible system, and some people use Dapr to do like multi-cloud stuff, right? Because you can use the same API regardless of the underlying resources. But that's only a very small fraction of people who do really true multi-cloud stuff. What I really like is I can like do some kind of local development and using like maybe a local in-memory store, and then switch to the cloud and use indeed Azure Cosmos DB. And then I only have to change one configuration file. It's called a component file, and not change any application code. So that's where the real power of Dapr is.
Gotcha.
But I'm going to show that all in the demo.
Yes.
So that's what I have slide wise to give a bit of more context, because to be honest, Dapr is also comes with quite a learning curve, right? So
yes,
Dapr
I can
quite
see
a
that.
complex thing. It offers a lot of functionality, but also that causes sometimes a bit of confusion, or what is Dapr exactly? It's hard to fully grasp the whole context by just giving that one liner. It provides APIs. Yes, that's all nice, but what can it actually do for me? Well, a lot. We did like a survey like last year amongst like a couple of hundred of Dapr developers, and they claim that on average they have like a 30% time saving. So people that really use Dapr versus when they don't use Dapr, they really find they are saving a lot of time, because they can focus on their domain logic, and they don't have to worry about the resiliency stuff and all of the very specific cloud SDKs or resource SDKs. So that's cool.
So like, what would you say are the benefits of Dapr's sidecar architecture versus like the traditional mesh solutions that are out there?
Yeah, so sometimes Dapr is compared with like a service mesh, but so there is like a bit of overlap, but the two are still quite different. So when it comes to like service meshes, they really deal with stuff on the network, right? So for instance, that can be very useful when you want to do like, for instance, A/B testing. You want to route some traffic to service A and another type of service to service B. But that's really due to like the network routing possibilities with service meshes, but that's not something that Dapr does. So Dapr is really more for like a development tool that application developers can use. And the service mesh part that doesn't really offer APIs for developers. So it's more operational. Indeed, it offers a few different features, like indeed what I mentioned, the A/B testing and routing. You can also do service discovery with service meshes. So that's an overlap when it comes to service mesh and Dapr, because you can also do service discovery with Dapr. But other than that, there's not a lot of overlap. But they both run in a sidecar typically. So that's why people sometimes think it's the same thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think it would be nice if you do. Yeah, I think it's nice if you do the demo right now. So it becomes a bit more real when you do the demo, right? So I think.
Yeah, because I'm curious how like Dapr can be adopted in like a microservice.
Exactly. Yeah. So all the code that I'm going to show is all open source, right? So if you go to like github.com/Dapr, so that's a Dapr organization, there are like dozens of repos there. I'm going to show some code that is part of the Quick Starts repo. I've named it Quick Starts Mark because sometimes I have like multiple clones of the same stuff on my laptop. But in this Quick Starts repo, there are a lot of samples of all of the APIs, but also across different languages. So that's because Dapr is like language agnostic. There are like many different samples across different languages. I'm going to show like a JavaScript one right now. And usually these language folders also have like two flavors. one that uses the client SDK and one that doesn't use the client SDK. So these are typically called HTTP folders, and then there's just some sample in there that calls like the Dapr HTTP API. I'm gonna use an example that uses the JavaScript client SDK for Dapr. So the file that's open, it's called the index.js. I've scrolled a bit down because there are some definition of constants, which is not super relevant for now. But here we see that we create a new instance of this Dapr client, and we specify some host name and port and which protocol we're using. And then we do like a for loop, and then we create like a new order, which just has an order ID. And we define a state object, and that contains a key and a value. And the key is order ID, and the value is the order itself. So like I mentioned before, so Dapr offers like state management API. So what we're going to do here is we're going to save this state to a state store, but we don't know yet which state store. So what we see here is we're going to use this Dapr client here, and we do await client.state and .save, and then we first specify a constant, and that constant is set to state store. Actually, I need to move here. So the Dapr state store name is referred to as state store, and I'll show you in like a couple of seconds where the state store is mapped to. So the client code doesn't have any knowledge about the exact state store where the data is going to. That's configured in another place, and then we specify the state that you want to save there. So this is the state object. Then we do a console log. I have some commented out code because what the application originally does, it also gets the same state and also deletes the state. But I want to show where the state actually is, so I'm only going to save it. So this is just a loop. It waits half a second before it does the next one. So let's run this. And there are a couple of different ways how you can run Dapr applications, but there is a Dapr CLI. So I have the Dapr CLI installed on my local machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like Dapr run, and then I say -f and a dot. So this instructs Dapr to run, but use a file specification. So that was what the -f means, and it's going to read the content of this file. So there's a dapr.yaml file here, and that contains two things now. It contains a path to some resources, and that is where the configuration lives of, in this case, the state store that I'm using. And it contains like usually it's a list of applications. In this time, it's only one application, but as I mentioned, typically you write microservices with Dapr, so it's quite normal that you have a list of applications here that are supposed to run all together. In this case, it's just one application called order processor. All right, so I'm going to run this. State will be saved to somewhere, and we're going to see a log message, and that's it. Now, this resources path, so that's here, contains a couple of files, and one of them is called state store _ Redis. Well, that already gives away where the state will be stored. And here you see the same label as we saw in our source code. So this metadata name, this state store, that matches with the label that we have here in the Dapr state store name. Yeah, so these two need to match up, and then Dapr knows, I see a label called state store in my application code, and I have this configuration loaded of this component file, and this then contains the actual type of the state store. So in this case, we're using a local Redis container to store the data in. I'm going to quickly have a look if there's any data in there. No. I'm a big fan of VS Code. I use everything, so I have also lots of extensions to connect to different data stores. So this is now the visualization of the Redis data store. Okay, I'm going to run it now, so we will see like different outputs that we're saving orders. So here we go. That's all running. So now we should see some data in here as well. Right. So these are 10 records now in our Redis state store, and the application is done. Okay, so I'm going to stop it. But what I'm going to do now is now I want to switch state stores. And when I make the switch of the state store, I'm not going to change any application code. So what I do now is I change the file extension of this file name. And usually you would do this in like a CI/CD pipeline, right? You just change your state store configuration. But since we're just doing it locally, I'm doing it here. So I've changed this extension to be like a temp, so Dapr will not recognize it as a valid configuration. But I've now enabled the other state store. And what's important is that this metadata name is still the same. So this is still state store. So Dapr knows this still matches with the state store that I've mentioned in my application code. But now this points to state.azure.cosmosdb. So now my data will be stored in Azure. So per different state store, you have some kind of different metadata. So now we're storing stuff to Azure. So I have to specify what's then the database and what's the collection. And it also needs some secrets. So that's why some extra information is there. Dapr also actually works very good with all kinds of secret stores. So I'm now using a local secret store of a file, but it can also work with all kinds of cloud secret stores. So I'm going to quickly check if, so this is my Azure resource. It will save documents in this KV container. It should be empty. Yeah, it still is. So now we're going to run the same application with the same application code because we didn't change anything in our application. We just changed one of these configuration files. And now the orders are being saved again. And if I refresh this, I should see some documents in here. Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's really the power of Dapr. So you can very easily switch out underlying resources while your application code, the JavaScript code, we didn't change anything here. So this is completely the same.
Nice. It's like a little sneaky. It's like sneakily simple.
Yeah, and indeed. Yeah, true. Yeah, and a lot of people use this for it to have like a nice separation between local development and then what's running in production. But sometimes also people use it to indeed use resources both in Azure and in GCP and in other places. So yeah,
interesting.
So
like how does Dapr manage security between, I guess, like between microservices, like communicating between microservices? What does that look like?
Yeah. So there are these things like scopes. I haven't defined them here, but what you can do, for instance, with state stores, you can define scopes. So and if I do it here on this state store with scopes, I can define the application IDs of the services that are allowed to connect to this state store. So I think it's called like order processor. So, and by default, if you don't mention any scopes, then everything is allowed. So that's nice and easy for demos, but this, of course, is not like a recommended practice when you go to production. So when you go to production, you should always use these kind of scopes to define what type of applications or which services are allowed to connect to kind of resources, or indeed which services are allowed to connect to other services. So that is done with these scopes, and this is the order application ID. I didn't mention that very clearly, but when I go back to this dapr.yaml file which I was running, so every application that you have in your Dapr microservice landscape has a unique application ID. So this application ID of this service is order processor, so there can only be one with this application ID. So this ID you can then use in resiliency policies or in these security policies for these scopes, and Dapr then can figure out, okay, yeah, this is allowed with this application ID.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The nice thing is that by default Dapr comes with quite decent defaults when it comes to security, but also resiliency. But you can still like override a lot of the defaults if you want. So I have like a resiliency policy here as an example. And again, everything that you can configure or do with Dapr is based on YAML, right? Because it's language agnostic itself. So, and it's basically run on Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is also mostly configured with YAML. So, if you're not a big fan of YAML, I apologize. But if you want to tweak the resiliency, so how many retries a service will do in case it encounters a failure, then you can create these resiliency policies. Again, you can scope these. So this is a resiliency policy that will only work for the order processor service. And then you can define these retry policies. And again, there's quite some flexibility there, because you can have like a policy that is very constant and it will retry every second. So that's this one. But you can also have like retry policies that go up exponentially, right? So maybe first it tries after every half a second, but then after every 1 second, and then after every 2, and every 4, 8, etc. So there's a lot of things that you can configure and override if you're not happy with the defaults.
Cool. And so earlier you mentioned that there can be a steep learning curve when it comes to adopting Dapr. What would you say is like the biggest, or like what are some of the common mistakes devs make when they're trying to implement Dapr in their microservices?
Well, maybe because they're not like fully aware of what Dapr already offers. So I can quickly switch to the Dapr docs maybe. Let's see. So this is the Dapr website, and this is the Dapr docs. So it's really a good your time is not wasted here if you spend reading this for like a couple of hours, because it looks very short and compact, but it's definitely not.
It's sneaky.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely follow the whole getting started thing, right? Because it's easiest if you get started like locally, right? So by installing the Dapr CLI and running all of the quick starts, right? So the ones that I was just running now, because the quick starts repo itself is already quite big. It covers all of the APIs across different languages. As a developer, you're probably only interested in 1, maybe 2 languages, but it's unlikely you want to try out all of them, of course. But then there are also there's really lots of detailed information of all of the different APIs or building blocks, as we call them. So if we, for instance, do like publish subscribe, so there are many different pages and chapters about PubSub, because some of these configurations can be quite detailed, right? So a lot of it is abstracted away, of course, when you use the APIs. But for instance, when you want to configure, if you want to use Kafka as a message broker or Azure Event Hubs, then you have to specify different types of metadata in these component files. And you have to know how you can configure this. So to be honest, most of the information is really there in the docs, but sometimes it's not so easily findable. You really have to know what you're looking for, right, to provide the right kind of keywords in your search, for instance. So definitely try to search a lot. There's a lot of information there, but it might also be quite overwhelming.
And I see Samir had a question. Are there any Dapr workshop recordings or tutorials available which showcase the step-by-step implementation of microservices leveraging Dapr? So like, are there any video tutorials in addition to the written quick start guides?
There are more and more of them. So Dapr also has like its own YouTube channel. So if I go back to here, there are different things, right? So we do like community call live streams every other week, and in those live streams we also sometimes focus on a specific building block and how to use it, or we give some space to like a Dapr end user where they share their story how they use Dapr. So that's definitely useful. But there's also this YouTube channel as well. So I definitely recommend you to have a look at this Dapr Dev YouTube channel. There's a lot of recordings because we've been doing these community calls also for years already. There's also recordings of earlier Dapr days, and those are usually some longer sessions where they dive into a certain topic. So there is definitely a lot of information there already. But also here you need to probably watch a couple of them before you can grok it completely.
Cool. Well then, I do see like comments about like Dapr being the best thing since sliced bread and like how amazing Dapr
Excellent.
is. So I think we do have some viewers in the audience who are familiar with Dapr.
Thank you.
I'm not so familiar with it, and so because it's so abstract, it's kind of hard for me to see. I would have to like dig into it and implement it in something for me to like truly grasp the amazingness of Dapr. But it seems like pretty like straightforward to like add to your microservices, to be honest.
Yeah, and but what's also good to realize if you want to just try it out, definitely go for the quick starts. But it's also good to realize that you don't have to go all in with Dapr. So maybe you have like a microservice landscape of maybe 50 services. You don't have to Dapprize all of the 50 to get the benefit, right? It's fine if you just start with one or two, because you can easily talk with a Dapperized microservice to other non-Dapperized microservices. So you don't have to go all in immediately. So you can gradually actually start using it. So hopefully that won't scare too many people when I say this. Yeah.
Right. And so since Dapr is open source, are you looking for contributors or additional maintainers? What kind of support are you looking for from the community?
Yeah. Let me switch to GitHub. So like I mentioned, so this is the Dapr org, and underneath that there are like a lot of repositories. So because we have like the Dapr runtime itself that's written in Go. So if you're like a Go programmer, just contributing to the Dapr runtime itself is highly appreciated. So that this one, but like I mentioned, we also have like different SDKs for different languages, right? So if you're a .NET developer, you could contribute to the Dapr.NET SDK. And so for all of the major languages, there is an SDK. So definitely help us is welcome there. We have like a very big docs repo, and well, docs are always a bit behind, right? And the things can always be described more clearly or with more visuals and stuff like that. So I definitely welcome everyone to also help contribute to Dapr docs. And so it's not only code contributions we want. If you maybe see, it could also be a typo that we need to fix, or something that just needs to be reworded to be more clear. And the Dapr docs is also like very welcome. And a lot of these repos now have dev containers, so it makes it a bit easier to get started with, right? So we can even just spin it up straight on GitHub, which is great. Especially for this Dapr docs one, I created like a contribution video, right? So how to get started with contributing to docs, but all of these have like contributing descriptions in Markdown, and also the Dapr documentation itself also has a contributing chapter where we go much more in detail on how you can contribute. So we first have an overview of what's out there. So there are docs, there are quick starts, that's a runtime. All of the components, so all of the configurations, how to use different state stores and different pub sub-brokers, etc. Those are part of what we call components contrib. So this is also a very big place where we see lots of contributions. And so if you are an expert on a very specific state store that you want to have the Dapr support in, well, then you can add that support in components contrib. A lot of different language SDKs, and finally there's the CLI. So that's also a good place where you can help contribute.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity for contribution. I think most of the repos also have like good first issues as well. Let's see if that's true here. Good first issue, or maybe not anything that's open. Maybe I should look into the runtime actually. As you can see, there's also enough open issues to get started with. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
what would you say are some of the most important ones?
I'm searching wrong. I just should click the label here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's definitely plenty of good first issues.
Nice.
And sorry, your question was?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, what are some of the most important ones you think?
Oh, important one. Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think docs are really important, right? So because if someone is really new to Dapr and they want to try stuff out and they want to quickly find out how something works, then I think people first try maybe the quick starts, but then they want to get some more information on the docs. So I would vote for, okay, see how you can contribute to the docs to make this onboarding experience better. So it's also where I want to spend more time on as well. That's why I created this video, how to actually help contribute to the Dapr documentation. But yeah, if you have some time and would like to contribute to Dapr, start with the Dapr docs. So then it also doesn't really matter what your programming skills or language skills are. It's all markdown. It's pretty well described. You can use the dev container. And so, yeah, I definitely recommend doing that.
And are you looking for any translation services or contributors? Constantine said that they saw a translation folder. Are you looking for translators as well?
Well, so we have like a dedicated Chinese translation of this, so that's there already. I don't think there have been like serious attempts to do for other languages, but yeah, I would definitely welcome that. Well, why not? I mean, it's got to be a very big job because there is a lot of content, but still, I mean, yeah, if that's for you, yeah, please help out there, yeah. And I think as usual, start with raising a GitHub issue. So first check if there's an issue already that matches with what you want to do. If there's no issue yet, please create one before starting to do any work. I think that's the most important part.
Yeah. I mean, Dapr looks great. I mean, the folks are excited about it. And
there's also like a pretty big community. So we have a Discord
Yeah.
as well, right? So there's Discord links everywhere. So yeah, if you're interested in it or if you want to help contribute or collaborate, the Discord is also the place to find your peers and to talk about what you want to do.
Nice. Well, sounds great. Join the Discord. Make sure you go to Dapr to contribute. Here is the repository one more time: github.com/Dapr. Check it out and see how you can integrate it into your microservices. I don't see any more questions from the audience. Any last words that you want to share with folks, Mark?
Well, I'm very curious, Nita. If you are using it, I would love some feedback, right? Because that's also part of my role to get feedback and feed that back to all of the maintainers and contributors to improve Dapr. And so yeah, don't hesitate to either connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter or X. So yeah, please reach out if you have some feedback from me, either good or bad. Both is welcome. Yeah, because I'm really looking forward to grow this community, but I'll definitely also improve the whole experience.
Nice. And I see Cecil said that, he's happy to do a hands-on Dapr live stream with you. I would definitely take him up on that one.
Yeah, he's one of the other Dapr community managers. I'm very happy that he's doing that role. So
Nice.
Thank you, Cecil. Nice one. Yeah.
Nice. Well, if that's it for today, thank you all so much for joining. This has been Dapr, the open source project that allows backend developers to use and build microservices more efficiently. I think I got it right this time. And the sidecar architecture does make it a lot, more seamless of an implementation in your microservices. It takes away a lot of that headache code that you have to build for like the same thing every time. And so definitely go check it out. Is Dapr selecting countries or for all? Oh, is Dapr available worldwide or is it only in certain countries?
No, it's completely open source, right? So you can download it and run it everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. No, you can install it from everywhere. So it's not a service or whatever. So no, it's a completely open source thing that you can run everywhere. You can run on top of Kubernetes or some kind of managed Kubernetes or just on your local machine, as I was doing now here.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Mark. And this has been Open Source Friday, and see y'all next time. Bye.